All right, here today with Michael Cooper for another amazing podcast. Super excited for today. Today we are talking about when our partners, say, you can say long-term partner, short-term partner, even someone that you're maybe not in a relationship with yet, or whatever the scenario could be, when your partner puts up walls, when a partner is resistant or triggers or traumas come up for them, what is the best way to support them through this? Is it
Mm.
holding space? Is it sending back the charge? Is it fire and fire? Is it water with fire? Is it? I mean, there's obviously a million answers to this situation, but it's feeling. I just felt it's a juicy topic in my world with some of my friends at the moment, and just sort of framing that. And I'm curious, with your experience and your incredible expertise, in my opinion, Mike, of holding space for this, when someone is bring that charge, is triggered, and maybe wants that space, wants that moment to retract. I guess, how does that feel for you, and how do you deal with that, and does it change over time, or is it always the same way you go about this? I'll open it with that leading question.
Mm. I think, as you said, there's a million ways to cut this one. Do I have the answer? I can only go with what I've done that
Yeah,
worked and what didn't work.
yeah,
Um, and I think a lot of this boils down to attachment styles.
yeah,
And so we've got generally there's four major types, but the two predominant ones are you've got a secure attachment style
yeah,
where someone's open to intimacy, they're open to connection, they're open to communication, they're open to diving deep and exploring themselves and you into me, I see, into me, you see. And so this is allowing myself to be seen by fully by you. Then you've got your um, anxious, your avoidant, and then the fourth one is a disorganized attachment style, which is a combination of anxious and avoidant at the same time. Really challenging attachment style because they're always ebbing and flowing between the two push and pull. So there's a lot of push and pull in the relationship. So generally, an anxious will attach an avoidant.
and defining these attachment styles, Mike, you've got a really specific way of explaining that. How do you define that so efficiently? Like, what's the red flags to know that this person has that kind of attachment style, or this kind of attachment style, or do you know what I mean?
If I was really, my belief, this is my belief, is we have all the attachment styles. Like I have
Yeah,
both anxious and avoidant,
yeah,
and I hear this a lot. People go, "Oh, I'm secure." I'm like,
yeah,
"Yeah, of course you are. You're on your own. You're single.
yeah,
We're all secure when
yeah,
we're single." Because I'm the most secure individual on the planet when I'm single.
yeah,
But when I get thrown into a relationship, I'm going to lean towards my default, which is predominantly anxious.
yeah.
And that's going to come from my childhood. All right. So it comes from our
Mm,
caregivers. And if I didn't get my needs met or I didn't feel safe in my relationship, that's going to cause me to be anxious with my parents.
yeah,
I'm going to be anxious. Right. And someone who's avoidant is actually pushing away because they don't feel safe in with their parent dynamic. Okay, so they're going to
yeah,
create distance to create safety. And then so the things to look out for with a, I think, yeah, everyone wants to secure a relationship. I can tell you in the dating pool, they're not there.
mm,
They're already in a relationship
mm,
because they can get into a relationship, they can get intimate with someone, they open so fully
yeah,
can communicate in relationships, so whole long-term relationships. So what we find a lot of the dating pool is to be very much overweight with avoidance.
mm,
Right? And avoidance deeply crave intimacy, but they're afraid of it. They
yeah.
do really crave it. And so they push you away as a safety mechanism. So I think the thing to look out for is, and everyone can move towards a secure relationship with the right person.
Yeah.
As if you've got a secure partner, it's much easier for you to move towards a secure attachment style
Yeah.
because you've got a model, you've got an example, they know how to hold space for you. But if you've got an anxious and an avoidant in the same relationship,
Yeah.
you're both going to be triggering both of your wounds and leaning more into your anxiousness or more into your avoidant, which is pushing them both away from each other.
Yeah.
And you're constantly triggering each other. So you're landing into a state of trauma more frequently, which means you're really moving further and further away from secure.
I love what you just
So
said about if you've both got the same kind of goal, you know, if you've both got the same overview goal of what you're working towards, that just makes it, it kind of makes anything possible, really. You know, that strength of working together to do that. But I guess when you don't have that goal and that focus on a similar outcome, or it's a little wishy-washy, it can
mm,
make it more difficult.
I think you would have heard this a lot in the, with connections, friends, clients, and whatever. So often you hear one person saying, "Ah, I really want this to work. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes, but I just can't
Yeah,
get my partner to go with me."
yeah,
That's going to be really challenging
yeah,
to
one
get
hundred
to any
percent.
level of security there.
Yeah, and the majority of those relationships have ended or are in the same situation. I always love that perception of, you know, where are you now and where do you see that in 5 years? Where do you see yourself being in 5 years? And that's a enlightening perception sometimes for people as well, to just drop into that. Is this going to change? And do I
Yeah.
need this to change? And can I become at peace with this if it doesn't, if that person's not going to grow or go down that road or whatever it might be?
Which really comes down to your goals, ambitions, and
Yeah,
the outcome for your life.
yeah,
Someone who's growth orientated, it's probably not going to align
yeah,
because they don't want to be in the same position they were 5 years ago.
yeah,
Like that's death to them.
yeah.
But it's someone who's not growth orientated. They could be quite happy to push on and settle for mediocrity,
Yeah,
and that's great for them. So
yeah,
there's a spectrum of that. But I think to come back, circle back around to
yeah,
how do you hold space, or do you hold space? Do
yeah,
you fire back? I can share from my past. I lent further into my anxiousness. So an anxious attachment style is when you're retracting or you're avoiding or you're pulling away, the little boy in me says, I'm not good enough. I'm clearly not doing enough for this relationship. If I did one more thing, which is my childhood wound, if I could just clean the garage a little bit better, if I could take the rubbish out more, my dad will love me.
yeah,
I
100%.
start, I start to enact like my little boy.
Mm,
And so in this moment, my beloved is pulling away because she needs space and she's in her avoidant tendency.
mm,
So she wants spaciousness, and I want to run to her and grab her and pull her back into it,
yeah,
antagonizing even more and creating her to want to run away even further.
yeah,
And so when I was not in control of my anxiousness, I would lean into more anxiousness. I would do more. I would smother more. I would love more.
yeah.
Was the repellent. It's the worst thing. It's not attractive
It's
to an
the
avoidant.
worst.
It's the
Yeah.
worst.
And to explain that to a man too, like for all the men listening out there now, um, you know, how do you think that makes your women feel when you sort of get yourself out of the equation? Because most of the time it does create separation and makes them feel yucky. And that feeling, I'm sure there's probably women listening to this now that like, oh yeah, I know that feeling. That feels yucky when, you know, you're looking for that space or that time just to feel it in your magic. Feel your magic. Feel all the things that you want to feel, or that you feel you need to feel. And we come along and like, let's fix it. No, we'll just fix it for you. You know, we've got it sorted. We'll just love you more. We'll do this, this, and this, and then you're sorted. Don't need to worry about it. It's like, no,
Yeah, which is you operating from your wounded space as well
yeah,
as trying to
yeah,
fix it or trying to do more, which is your wound of I'm not good enough.
yeah,
And I think what I've learned probably in the last, I've probably been working on it for 3 years now,
mm,
but really came into deep awareness of it in the last 12 months and probably got a lot better at it,
mm,
was when the avoidant comes up, I chuckle.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's the first thing is like, I've been here before. This is not new for me.
yeah,
I can see what you're doing. So you're in a state of being frightened. You're
yeah,
in a state of fear. And so in that moment, when I get this awareness, I can drop into understanding,
yeah,
empathy, equanimity. How can I allow you to be in your need? Okay, I get it. You need to create a boundary. You need to create a little distance.
yeah,
That's not a reflection of me. That's a reflection of you.
yeah,
And so in that moment, I do chuckle, like a little a loving chuckle, but the
yeah,
chuckle is more to myself, not at them at
yeah,
all.
yeah,
It's like, oh, okay, this is to self. We've been here before.
yeah,
You're okay. I'm talking to my inner dialogue now. You're okay. You're good. And so now what I do is I just witness.
mm,
I embody Shiva. I picture Shiva.
Mm.
Shiva waited for Parvati for thousands of years. You know, in the Hindu culture, their lifetimes go for a long time,
Yeah.
and he waited for his consort in meditation for thousands of years, and he just witnessed her in all of her mess or story or love or whatever it was. He was just in loving witness, which
Yeah.
is Shiva, right? The energy of Shiva is loving awareness, divine consciousness, and presence.
Yeah.
I'm like, so what if I was like that?
Mm.
And if I collapse and I crumble into my anxiousness,
Mm-hmm.
I'm dropping into my feminine, which is more chaos.
Yeah.
So I've got a woman, in this case, my beloved, in her feminine
Mm-hmm.
chaos,
Mm-hmm.
in her avoidance, because it's a safety mechanism for her. I was like, she's not feeling safe. How do I create more safety? I deepen my grounded presence. I create a stronger frame. Like I actually increase my presence and I just fall into loving presence and witness. And I would just sit there and it's like, okay, and what else, baby? What else? What do you need? And let her create the boundaries or the pushbacks or and then eventually, if the relationship's at that level, I would say, do you see what you might be doing? And
Mm.
just gently invite her to look at like, hey, I love you. I'm not leaving you, but I'm okay for you to take some space as well.
Yeah.
I'm honoring your boundaries. Now, all of a sudden, there's no reason to fight me to hold these boundaries because I've accepted them.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is the boundaries or the pushback actually increases before it dissipates.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I accept it, it's like, well, here's another boundary.
Yeah. It's that
And here's
exactly.
another boundary. Well, you
Yeah.
know what? There's one more. And I'm like, and they escalate.
Yeah.
And then I chuckle and I'm like, okay, cool. How much more distance would you like to place between us?
Yeah.
And that's like this little drop. It's a mic drop that she
Yeah.
goes, oh, I am doing that, aren't I? It's like, yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love you anyway. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's so disarming by allowing equanimity. It's the most beautiful word. How
Mm.
can I allow her that boundary? How can I allow her to create distance?
Yeah.
And in doing so, I strengthen my own frame, which means I don't need to collapse. I'm solid in who I am.
100%.
I'm not going to lie to you. That's the outside. This is what she's seeing. On the inside, my little boy's crying.
Yeah.
He hurt like mm,
Mm.
so much.
Yeah.
But he is really feeling because all he wants is closeness, connection, communication, intimacy.
Yeah.
And anything that is not that, he considers unloved.
Yeah.
So he's in deep pain.
Yeah.
So I'm regulating him while I'm regulating her.
Yeah.
I'm holding space for her and loving witness.
Mm.
And at the same time, I'm breathing deep into my root chakra
Yeah.
and widening my stance, widening my frame. And at the same time, I put my hand on my heart while I'm talking to her. And I'm like, I might close my eyes every now and then and go, it's okay. You're okay. I love you. And I'm
Yeah.
talking to my little boy now.
Yeah.
And I let him know that, hey, I'm not abandoning you. She
Yeah.
needs a breather,
Yeah.
but I'm staying with you.
Yeah.
And that's how I've learned to manage it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's fun.
Yeah.
Like I would love, and here's how I end it. This is how I end the communication with my beloved. I'm like, so thank you for seeing that there's the need for boundaries or some bigger space.
Mm.
I really appreciate that you can feel that was creating space. And who knows, maybe in the future, we can learn to communicate that a little differently.
Yeah.
And I'm just seeding the idea that in the future, be it however long, whatever
Yeah.
time frame, that we could more communicate. Like, I feel, this is maybe my beloved now speaking, I feel the need to push you away. Love that. Thank you, baby. Thank you for sharing that. As
Mm.
opposed to pushing me away.
Yeah.
Because all it is it's a feeling. I feel the need to push you away. It doesn't mean I have to. But when our triggered state or our fight or flight nervous system kicks in, we actually do push away because we think it's a life and death scenario.
Yeah.
So that's the invitation, that not right now. We don't need to address this now. I'm not going to coach you right now, but I am going to seed that maybe in the future we could learn to navigate this without the separation or the avoidance by simply speaking to the fact that I desire to, or my little boy desires
Yeah.
to, or
100%.
my little girl does. Yeah. So that's just from my experience.
Yeah.
One way didn't work that well. The other way seems to be working really well, because what I've noticed is the reduction in the avoidance. So in the past, avoidance would go for 5 days because I kept doubling down and my anxiousness was kicking in and chasing it.
Yeah.
Now I don't chase.
Yeah.
I attract what I want.
Yeah.
And the avoidance goes for a couple of hours, maybe,
Yeah.
all because I held my frame,
Yeah.
regulated myself. And when I've regulated myself, it says to my beloved, hang on, he's not troubled by this. I'm raging, I'm chaos, I'm pushing back.
Mm.
And he sits there and he's like, the same. Maybe this isn't such a big problem.
Yeah.
And this is all happening internally because of the structure that I'm holding. So it's been a beautiful lesson. And have I perfected it? Ah.
Oh, I love
Am I a work in progress?
I
A
love that
hundred.
all so much, man. I think, some people out there might be hearing this and being like, wow, that's a lot of work. Like, how do you process all that? How do you think about that? How do you frame all that? How do you work on that? And also maybe even why do you have an interest in working on that? Whereas some people might be like, oh, it's not for me, just it's too deep. Then other men maybe listening might be just fully integrated with everything that you just shared and be like,
Mm,
that's normal, that's just what you do, like exactly what you just said. And neither is right or wrong, but I guess I think of
mm,
that evolution in my journey and with my studies of other people, not studies of this sort of work, but studies of other people and working with other people along the way, that it seems to be so often that transition from the boy to the man
yes.
energetically along the journey is where we start to have an interest in these things. Not saying the people that don't have an interest are a boy in energetically speaking, but possibly that if it's of interest to you, if there's any part of you that's triggered by this right now, maybe it's an invitation to look at that and lean into that growth and development. Because for me it was growth and development. It was a conscious decision to lean into that, to learn more about that, and practice these practices, like literally. And by far, am I any kind of master at that? And I never will be. That's the whole journey, that's the whole
Right.
cosmic joke. It's just like, it's got to be the practice, right? But that, you think of everything you just spoke about, and just to simplify it to, okay, maybe the other aspect of this spectrum that you just spoke into holding that incredible space would
Mm,
be sort of somewhere in the middle. Could be something like being condescending. Okay, so if in return, rather than learning to hold space, you're trying to hold space and you want to, but there's a little slight essence of being condescending to the partner who's wanting space. That shit can be terrible, and it's really not leaning into the energy, and it's so easy to do as well. That's an art form in itself, even. And it's not about the words, it's so often about the energy behind the words that is the
yeah,
condescending, and in that sensitivity of those, um
100%.
yeah, those sharings.
I'm
And then
laughing because I'm laughing at myself for doing
I
that.
know. Yeah, and I want to hear more on this from you as well, man. Just the last little thing on that is the other thing of checking out, right? Where you're like, you know what, this is too
Mm,
much, and or not even too much, but just like when you start to bring that energy yourself, or that charge of no, well, actually, no, I need space, right? And how that would look, of just that kind of checking out, which is really, maybe that's what they're calling in. The partner who's wanting that space is actually really just calling in, of like, beneath it all, and maybe not even consciously at all, but like, this is
mm.
this is a test for you. How much has
Yes.
this person actually got my back, right?
Yes, it is. It's
It's the
exactly what it is.
it's the test. And but also at some point, maybe you don't need to be tested anymore. And again, this is a fine line, it's not that black and white, but I've definitely had chats with partners similar to what you sort of framed before, of like, we can repeat this as many times as you like. I'm happy to do this with you. At some point of repeating this pattern so many times, maybe we should speak about having some sort of, maybe it's a permission piece where you say, hey, babe, I've got that thing coming up for me again. We know how this is going to go. Can we do that? Or maybe it's like, actually, I've got the thing coming up for me again, and I need to go through it exactly the same way we went through it again, because I got the resolution I needed. Can you hold that space for me again? Sure, I can. As opposed to an unconscious thing. Now, again, that's kind of maybe a next step of evolution, and more than some people have the interest in doing, but that's okay.
Mm.
If you still listen to the podcast, then maybe this is for you,
Yes,
and
still
maybe
here.
Mike's about to drop a huge golden nugget. So stay tuned. But
Mm.
yeah, let me know. What do you think about all that, Mike?
Yeah, I that's the you were talking about practice, right?
Mm,
And I didn't learn a single thing from the times that I won. I learned a lot from the time I failed. And I'll
mm,
bring it back to music. And we've shared this, you shared this with me early on in the piece, and I've learned this through practice, is that I can sit at home and play the same chords or the same song and make a million mistakes because I'm at home. There's no pressure. And it's like, oh, that was just a wrong note, or that was off with timing and whatever. The minute I play that in front of a crowd and make that one mistake, I'll
yeah,
never do it again.
yeah,
And so, unless you're actually in the arena of relationships or relating, you're not going to perfect this. I can read all the books, I can watch all the YouTube videos, I can get all the mentors, great knowledge. None of it's embodied,
yeah,
none of it's wisdom. So, knowledge exists outside of us, it's
yeah,
external to us.
yeah,
Wisdom is the embodiment of said knowledge.
yeah,
So, I could do all the YouTube videos, but until I get into a relationship and I get tested by the fire, with my beloved coming at me with rage
yeah,
or ice and whatever is being thrown at me, can I hold my poise? Can I hold my frame and not be reactive? Then I have wisdom. Then I have that knowledge which is embodied as wisdom. And so I strongly recommend, if you want to have a, that you mentioned a great point around the feminine testing. That doesn't stop. If
yeah.
you want an easy life and not be tested, don't date a woman. And I'm saying that with
I
all the
love
love,
that. I love
because
that.
women are our greatest teachers. And but right, the reality is, if you want an easy life, don't date a woman, because her role in the feminine is to test us. She's to test masculine because she sees your vision, she sees what you're capable of, and she will call you into a higher state of being, into a higher frequency. And so that feminine testing is exactly what you said. It's, I don't feel safe right now. The problem's out in the world, whether it be other men as predators, whether it be the pressures from work, whether it be the own stories in my mind, whatever it is, I'm going to bring you that problem. And if you react, you're going to validate that this is bigger than the both of us, and I need to let all my storm out. Whereas when we're non reactive, it's like, oh, wow, tell me more, sweetie. How does that make you feel? Like, and what's beneath that feeling? And then validate that for her. Don't diminish it and go, that's not true, babe, or that's nothing. Just go, wow, yeah, I understand exactly why you feel that way. That makes perfect sense to me.
Mm,
But you know what? I believe in you. I'm not going anywhere. I love you. And I've got you. All of a sudden, she's like, this guy doesn't get worried by my problem. Maybe it's not a big problem at all.
mm,
And the storm will dissipate because she's testing, how much can this man hold me and my chaos and my problems. And if he weighs into the problem, he's like, oh, if he gets reactive, then she's going to double down, right? And then also she's going to pick up a masculine shield because, like, well, I can't trust him. He lost his shit over it. So I need to be stepping into my masculine now. And now she's going to come from a wounded masculine space to try and protect herself. So as a man, I'm always asking, this is the test. When I'm getting triggered, I'm like, oh, I'm being tested right now. And in that moment, I can go, rest back into this. If you come from the place of poise and calm, the test will potentially escalate because she hasn't hit your buttons yet. But eventually, she's going to tire herself out because she's like, I tried this guy. I pushed all the buttons that I know should work and do work, and they worked on every other guy.
mm.
This guy doesn't react. I had this the other day in a conversation with a beloved, and she's like, I was preaching all of these things, and then I was the one reacting, and you were the constant. You were the pillar that did not move. And as a result of that, she got to self reflect, and she got to process it quicker, and come back. And guess what? Here's the thing, guys. Generally speaking, intimacy will be on the back of that, right? And that connection that men as a whole generally desire, because for a man, we benchmark our relationship on the level of intimacy that we have. If we're having sex, if we're having closeness, if we're having touch, it means to our simple masculine brain, the relationship's in a healthy status. But if that's on ice and I'm getting pushback and I'm getting rejection, clearly we're doing something wrong. And we know that at a DNA level. And so what I find is when I can hold my poise through the storm, you know, I look at the mountains don't quiver when we see a storm on the horizon. The lighthouse, which is what we want to be as a man in our relationship, doesn't crumble when it sees the waves crashing against the cliff. It just keeps shining its light. And so if I keep shining my light and I become that lighthouse or that steadfast fixed point for her, I think you taught me this analogy. I think it was you. Whereas the masculine is the core of the earth and the feminine rolls and rotates around it.
Yep, that was me.
That's a phallic symbol. It's not a mistake. All right, I'm doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
That's the phallics. And the feminine is the earth, Mother Gaia, rotating around. Now, if I'm flat, if I'm not firm, if I'm not fixed, and I'm not steadfast, it's going to be painful for her to try and rotate around me. She's going to seize up. Which actually happens during sex. Right? Because she doesn't trust you, it's going to be painful. And so let's take that metaphor into the energetics of our relating and say, okay, cool. If I can be steadfast, if I can be a lighthouse and non-reactive, like there's a storm coming and the light just keeps spinning on the lighthouse. It doesn't stop and go, oh, lightning. Well, that's what a lot of people do in relationship. Oh, pushback. Oh, chaos. Oh, frightening. They do that. They go, oh, that's not trustworthy. I can't bring my problems to you. And so our role as the man, yes, is to be that steadfast position so the feminine can flow and dance and move around us. But if I'm collapsing, guess where she goes as well? She's going to collapse. And so, it's, you know, I think you brought up a question then. Why do I do this? Or why do we do this? Or what is the interest in that? One is an evolutionary growth, but I would much rather be happier in my relationships than in fighting and in conflict or in contraction. And so to me, I'm expanding at every opportunity. How can I expand into my relationship? How can I be more open in my relationship? There's heat in my relationship right now. Can I open my heart to that? Because energy can't be just created, nor can it be destroyed. It can neither be transferred or transmuted. So if she's bringing chaos to me, the way for me to transmute that is to bring it into my heart and transmute it to love. Honey, I take your chaos. I take your anger. I take your fire. Open my heart and I watch it change and I breathe back in love. And when I take a positive charge and a negative charge to the same degree and I bring them together, they dissolve and go back to light. Now, light is interchangeable with love, God, source, universe, soul, all of the universal principles. So when I take her negative charge and I equal it with my positive charge, it dissolves, disintegrates, and goes back to God. And in that moment, she gets to feel my oneness, my God-like particle, my presence. It's another for God, presence or truth. And she can surrender to that. Surrender is not a weak word. It's a beautiful word. People get it mixed up. The surrender for the feminine is her natural essence. She wants to surrender, but we don't give her the platform to surrender. And so in that moment of my presence, she can surrender to that. And all of a sudden I've invoked her feminine essence and her softness. And this is where the intimacy comes in, because I held my poise. It's beautiful.
Brother, so well said. You just spoke so well. And that question that we started this podcast with, to have that summed up so incredibly well. Such a privilege to listen to you today, brother. Thank you for sharing your magic. On that note, we will close up. We're going to do one more next week, and that'll be it before Christmas and New Year's, and then we'll take a bit of a break for a bit. But man, love
Lots
you,
of
brother. So
stuff
beautiful.
coming up over December, mate.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Actually,
Thanks,
on a
Mike.
side note, I would like to see you at some point over Chrissy if we can make that happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll close this up and let's have a chat about that. So, love you, brother.
Love you, brother. Talk soon, mate.